Hello. How's everyone doing?
Pablo, what's shaking?
Howdy.
Awesome. Okay, we're here today for a fireside chat with Pablo Dominguez. Before we dive in, I always like to start things off with a quick icebreaker. Question of today is going to be, do you prefer a relaxing vacation, like, sipping a margarita on the beach, or are you more like the filled with activities, let's go jet skiing, let's go skiing? Pablo, want to start us off?
You said margarita, so which is my drink, my beverage of choice. I like to
Oh,
do
there we
nothing
go.
during vacation. So I'll take option one, just relaxing and literally doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, I feel that it's like one of those things where you can like do both. Like, why not both? Why not have a margarita on the jet ski? Sounds really
That's a
sounds
dangerous
like they would
combination.
probably. I was gonna say that would probably like violate your key man insurance policies. I would imagine.
Probably.
I think probably my preference there, like, well, shit, man. Like, I think first and foremost, like any vacation would be really helpful. But like, as you know, as a founder of a company, kind of oftentimes difficult to do that. But I think in general, because I've got a 5-year-old, we typically try to orient things around like enrichment activities, skiing or things like that. So I think that would probably be our preference right now, not because it's particularly my preference, because I think unplugging and chilling out would probably be useful to me. But more kind of like lined up around the munchkin. What about you, Elliot? Are you a margaritas on a jet ski kind of guy?
Margaritas on the jet ski? Not really.
Oh,
I'll do it on the beach during the day and reserve that energy for those nighttime activities. That's my go-to there.
nice. I love it.
Uh, always a good time. Okay, so I do see that we have a few more folks trickling in, so I'm going to get us started. Of course, we're here today for the Fireside Chat with Pablo. Today's event is brought to you by the team here at Modern Sales Pros. For everyone not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, an online forum, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of MSP, you're going to be invited to join after this event. To go over some quick housekeeping notes, first of all, this event is being recorded. You're going to be able to access the recording and key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if there's any questions for our guests, please do use the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to get to them during the event. Okay, so Pete, I'm going to pass things off to you now, talk about Atrium, and do some intros.
Heck yeah, let's do it. Hey folks, my name's Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. For folks who are not familiar, Atrium makes what we call data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales organizations. So AE, SDR, managers, leaders, et cetera, use data to improve team performance. And so the way that Atrium does that is by continuously monitoring dozens and dozens of AE and SDR KPIs and proactively alerting managers, leaders, ops, et cetera, when something is off with their teams and so on. And so what this means is that managers can get to coaching insights faster and drive positive behavior change and win. So that's a little bit about us. Let's do a little intros here. So, man, Pablo, you look so fancy in your headshot there. Right, definitely like lower visibility as compared to your puffy right now, but like definitely like right out of billions there. Just for folks, really quickly, my intro for me is like I noted, founder of Atrium. One of the prior to Atrium, I started and sold a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's really where I kind of went from being like a business generalist founder to being like our first seller, our first sales manager, our sales leader, et cetera. We had like a 20-person sales organization when we were acquired by Monster. And then subsequent to that acquisition, I was responsible for new product sales at Monster, it was like 1,000-person sales organization, so a little bit different. Subsequent to that, ended up writing a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and started Modern Sales Pros. So that's a little bit on me. Pablo, maybe you can share with folks a little bit about what you spend your time doing at Insight. We're going a lot deeper on that, obviously, throughout the rest of the conversation. But also maybe a couple of the roles beforehand, so people kind of like understand like the arc of Pablo, just kind of briefly.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, that picture was for the CRO CMO summit that we hosted for our portfolio companies in when was it? 2020, right before the pandemic. So hence
Nice.
hence the professional look there. But yeah, so Pablo Dominguez, pleasure to talk to everybody. Operating partner at Insight Partners, investment firm that focuses on B2B SaaS growth investments. Run the sales and customer success team here at Insight, supporting our portfolio companies as they scale. I've been working in basically go-to-market roles my entire career, starting in consulting. Did 2 stints at public companies, went to a startup for 5 years, and now I've been here at Insight. So from Texas, but live in New Jersey, and excited to talk to you and the team, Pete.
Well, that's why you said howdy earlier.
It is exactly why I said howdy.
Nice. Well, before we get jamming here, one of the things we want to offer folks who are here, I imagine we probably have a bunch of revenue operations folks, we'll probably sales leadership and what have you as well. But if folks would like one of our sweet sales nerd hoodies, we'd love to send you one. They're lovely. They're nice and cozy, but then also, distinctive and celebratory of that unique kind of acumen that the modern sales leaders, revenue operations person has. We're going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat here. You can go ahead and sign up for one of those. All we ask in exchange is a quick discovery chat with you regarding how you're using data to measure and manage your sales teams. So all right, let's get jamming here. So cool, man. Like, I think what will kind of be cool for folks to understand is, I think, fresh out of college, you started out in at the Alexander Group, which if folks don't know, Alexander Group is kind of like a boutique management consulting firm that's focused specifically on sales excellence. I think that's kind of how I might describe it. Yeah. But oftentimes, like, if you go back and look at like some of the backgrounds and a lot of like revenue operations leaders, if you find an Alexander Group line item in their resume, it's usually like a pretty good sign. I always tell people, like, we have a bunch of like rules in pre-call planning for my my AEs, right? So like there's a set of organizations that have like really good sales management diaspora, so like Box and Datadog and MuleSoft and so on and so forth, and then there's kind of like it's like similar signifiers for former RevOps people. I guess PTC would probably be an example of that as well.
Yeah.
And the same is true over on RevOps side. Like usually when you have people from Alexander Group that have gone in-house, it's usually a pretty good sign. So maybe you can kind of share with folks a little bit on how that transition took place from going from Alexander Group to startups and revenue operations in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I think many consultants, I don't know if you've done consulting or not, consulting is a great way to see the world, approach different issues across different industries, companies and stuff. But you're traveling 5 days a week, right? Or at least you were back in the day pre-COVID. And so, after 4 years, somebody on the team landed at a public company, and they called and said, "Hey, this place is rife with opportunity. Would love you to come join." And I was honestly tired of traveling, and I was dating a girl who I wanted to get engaged with and settle down. So I was like, "Hey, good time to go into a corporate role." And honestly, it was scary, Pete, because like consulting is exciting, right? Because it's different. There's something different every day, and I always thought like, oh, if I go to one company, it's going to get boring real quick. But that was never the case. Even though it was a public company, and you could argue things move slowly, there's always fires and things that are broken. And so, went into a RevOps role there. And as you know, in RevOps, you're always constantly fixing things and being given opportunities. M&A happens, or new product launches, or you're going into a new region. So it kept it honestly very exciting. And I stayed there 8 years in my first role, and it was awesome. So
I love it. I love it. And how long have you been at Insight now?
I've been at Insight almost 4.5 years. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And actually, maybe you
good.
could share with folks a little bit around like where Insight invests. I think that just kind of might be helpful there because obviously
Yeah,
there's, all these like private stock investors. Let's
yep,
not use the private equity word. They all kind of have like similar, there's Insight and there's Index and then there's like IVP and and like, they all kind of like merge together. I mean, I'm
yeah,
surprised that you guys don't have like rock or stone in your name, but
yeah.
but maybe you could kind of share a little bit about like where what makes Insight unique
Yeah,
and kind of the type of companies that they invest in.
absolutely. So we've been around over 25 years.
Mhm.
Basically defined, and we're one of the first companies to basically go all in on software. And we basically focus on B2B software.
Mhm.
There is some B2C motion in there, but it's we're also growth investors, right? So we're not doing restructurings and stuff. We've invested in companies that are growing, and we have both focus on sort of a PE and a VC firm, right? So we have a large number of investments globally. Basically, invest in any industry as long as it's software and it's growing effectively. And we do everything from early stage investments to mid stage to late stage. And it's exciting because you get to see the entire spectrum of different sizes of companies, whether it's a Series A all the way to exit. We've minted about 90 plus unicorns, and we're heavily invested in in Israel, in Europe as well. So we definitely are a global company, and we've got I would say the best software investors out there.
Totally. And
And I'm not one of them, so I'm not talking
and
about
I
myself.
was gonna say and the operations team and
And the
it's
operations team, yeah, the
we'll talk
operating
about
team.
that a little bit more here in a second. But yeah, like yeah, I think I mean obviously the sales tech companies that Insight has invested, like obviously everyone knows SalesLoft, duh,
Yep.
right? Especially in the MSP community because SalesLoft is so heavily involved in MSP. Actually, Kyle was one of our fireside chats for our Megasco. Um, but I think I'm kind of other sales
Yeah, a
tech
couple of
companies. You
others.
guys,
Yeah,
Six
that you guys like.
Sense,
Sixth Sense, obviously.
Revenue Tech.
Yep.
It's all like it's not a funnel, it's a bow tie, right?
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jocko.
Sixth Sense
So
is
like
one.
Six Sense would be
Also,
one.
Quota Path, right? So for those of you,
All right.
everybody on the call probably uses commission software.
Mhm.
Heavy investors in Quota Path, and they're revolutionizing sort of how that gets done. Set Sail, as well as one of ours out in California. So yeah, we touch a wide range of not only go-to-market tech but also other elements. So very exciting.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like just scanning across you guys' portfolio page, and I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of Atrium customers here.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Love to see that. Good old checkout.com, Divvy. Yeah, you're right. You guys can pick them. You can pick
we
them.
we
Yeah,
can. Good
looks
team.
looks good there. Ooh, Qualtrics, that's a good one. Man, I'd love for those guys to be a customer. Damn. Cool. But like, so as you were kind of joking about earlier, you are not on the investment side of the house. Instead, you are on the operating partner side of the house, which I mean, hence your title. And you guys call your kind of operating team Insight on site. And maybe you can share a little bit about that now, because like I mean, I feel that at this point, you guys kind of, it's like the Yankees, right? You have like this murderer's row of amazing like GTM folks. So like obviously, I mean, you're no slouch, but Jeremy Donovan is there and he's like king sales nerd, emperor sales nerd on his sales nerd throne. And then I think you guys brought on Hillary Headley, who previously was the head of sales operations and enablement at Zoom. I think Michelle, I forget what her new
Michelle
last name is.
Johnson.
Yeah, previously Cloninger Johnson now, ran RevOps at Flock Safety, etc. So like, I mean, has the team always been that big? Maybe you can kind of take us through like what
Yeah.
the hypothesis was behind Onsite and why Insight decided to, start that 4 years ago when you joined, and then kind of like, what it looks like right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So good question. So I talked a little bit about how the strength of the investment team, right? And you can see the investments on our website just to get a sense of where we go. part of what Insight decided to do a little over 15 years ago in aggregate was build out an operating team that would basically drive value for our portfolio companies. So that team is called Onsite. It's made up of professionals across all sorts of disciplines: product, engineering, marketing, talent, sales, customer success. And then there's separate teams that also do other more strategic functions, et cetera. But from an advisory perspective, the idea is, hey, we make these investments, right, in companies, and it'd be great to support those CEOs and their teams on their journey, right? So not only do you get access to Insight's money and great investors, but now you've got a team of professionals that have been there and done that, right? And can help you scale on your way to an exit, right? Whether that exit is ultimately an IPO, which is every founder's desire, or a successful exit getting sold to someone else, right? So those teams are with you on all stages, et cetera. So I joined 4.5 years ago to run sales and customer success. That team was around 2 individuals right at the time. Because Onsite was growing. I think overall Onsite, I can't remember how big it was, but and that team, to your point, you mentioned some of the teams we've added has scaled the last 4.5 years. We're about 20 people on sales and customer success now. Yeah, and we've added. We have specialists that focus on customer success specifically, right? A very strong team there, focus on channel sales as well. Just because we're here to meet the needs and the demands of the CEOs in our portfolio companies. And so as issues come up, we want to make sure we have the best talent available to help you solve those issues and help you scale as well.
Yeah. And then, so like, what are some of the examples of like, quote unquote services that the Onsite team would deliver, and maybe like, how is that different depending on stage of the organization? Because I think like Jeremy Donovan is in the like mid-market. I think you have like 3 tiers for sales and what have you. And I think Rich is in the little organizations or like the emerging organizations.
Yeah, we're trying to, as an organization, we're trying to meet our founders where they are, right? So obviously early stage founders need different things. As you grow and you get to mid stage and then late stage, your issues are obviously different, right? The needs of a 100 million ARR company in terms of what they need to go to market is very different than 2 million ARR, right? So we're trying to provide solutions that are integrated across product, marketing, sales, CS, talent, to meet the needs of the founder, where they are. So for example, and I'll give an example of what's going on today in the economy, right? So churn is a very big topic today for founders or CEOs. Like, economy potentially is slowing down. Nobody knows, but there's obviously headwinds. And help me solve a churn issue, right? Or I'm seeing degradation in my base. What do I do? So could be a product issue, right? Could be a pricing issue. It could be maybe we're not marketing the right people. We've got to change our persona and ICP. Maybe reps are focusing on they're ignoring renewals and just focusing on something else, right? Or maybe your CS team isn't trained effectively. So those are all, we have people across those disciplines that would work together to figure out, all right, let's diagnose what the actual issue is and come back to the CEO and their team and say, hey, here's what we found. This is not just a functional issue here or there, but it's a holistic issue across the business. And here's some recommendations, and we work with them to resolve that. It's actually pretty fun.
What would be the mechanism by which you guys are able to like, jump in and kind of like debug like that? Because I imagine that requires, like interpretate, like probably interpreting data in some sort of capacity.
Yeah,
like
we work hand in hand. Yeah. So like it's somewhat consultative, right? We work hand in hand with the CEO and their teams. Some of it is, diagnosing in discussions with the leadership team, looking at the data, right? Like working with them to understand, well, what is your pipeline telling you? What is your customer data looking at it? Looking at cohorts to see if there's different customers behaving a certain way. Leveraging the expertise of the company, right? Like we don't pretend to have all the issues, right? We have a lot of smart people here, but it's great learning also from the portfolio and the teams that they have, and in a joint way, coming up with, hey, we found something. Now, what do we do about it, right? So, and again, the engagements vary, right? Obviously, a 200 million ARR company is going to have a lot more complexity. You have a larger RevOps team and sales and marketing team and product to work with. Company at 5 million may not even have a RevOps person, right? May not even have a sales leader, right? So the engagement is really tailored to what you have and what the issue is, and your ability to also execute it, right? We don't want to overwhelm someone at 5 million in ARR with like, hey,
Here's a bunch of things for you to work on.
exactly.
They're like, it's like
And
a
it's like
bunch of
me and
homework.
like, yeah, exactly. So we try to be very pinpointed on the recommendations to really try and help you to solve those.
So I think that's interesting. I mean, there's a number of benefits associated with like a traditional consulting model, right? Like not only do you have folks who can come in and like give you a fresh pair of eyes, and but also there's kind of like the information like union, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Like the expertise union, where as you guys are kind of like these little honeybees going out to the kind of going out to the different parts of the network. Obviously there's like centralization of best practices there as well, because you have like clever things like use Divvy as an example. There's a gentleman there who runs sales operations, Ryan Meeker, who's former Box, former Envision. He's great. He's super
Great.
sharp. Yeah, he's super bright. Actually, now he runs RevOps at Bill.com. That's why Bill.com bought Divvy, was for Ryan, obviously. And but he was a very muscular acqui-hire. Just kidding. But the point is that like you have a bunch of these folks that like kind of add to the edges of the network doing like really smart and creative stuff. And what's great about that is like obviously you guys can like centralize that and then like rebroadcast that. What are the sort of the mechanisms by which you guys kind of go about that? I know that like Jeremy has done a number of presentations for like modern sales pros, like virtual summits and what have you, but that's kind of content-y and what have you versus kind of like being pushed directly to the portfolio. How do you guys like, maybe you can describe that centralization and then also the kind of that rebroadcast mechanism?
Yeah, no, it's great. So because we have so many portfolio companies, I loved your analogy of the bees going out and coming back, right? Because we are able to fly around and work with the portfolio companies and then come back and say, hey, besides the knowledge that the team has and what we're seeing in the market online or in other discussions, now we have hundreds of data points to say what this person is doing is awesome. Let's connect them, et cetera, right? So we're constantly trying to gather best practices across all disciplines, right? The functional disciplines I mentioned before. But we try to regularly also have sessions with leaders annually, right? So our internal Marcom team is excellent at getting CEOs together to network and build a very cohesive sort of internal structure and share best practices, right? And annually we host a RevOps summit for Insight RevOps leaders to come together, share best practices, for us to share what we're seeing, et cetera, and to also build sort of a community internally for them to learn from each other. So we do the same thing for CROs and CMOs. So we'll be doing a summit actually this fall, probably with Pavilion. So I'll share that now today, where we'll bring leaders together specifically for the same way, right? Because I think that's where people learn. Again, I'll reiterate it. Like we know a lot because we see a lot, but the people in the field also know a lot because they're living it, and so we want to leverage that expertise.
What where are those normally at, those conferences?
They
You guys are based
vary.
in New York, right? Isn't that
Yeah,
what you said?
sometimes they're in New York. We did one in Atlanta. The last one was in Atlanta, actually. So we tried to mix it up, but it just depends. So
nice. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. I went to the Sales Loft Rainmaker event in Austin in August, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I think that folks have maybe forgotten a little bit about like how the intensity and kind of like the the clarity of real-time kind of interaction, or like richness, maybe not clarity, richness of real-time interaction. And also kind of like just like relationship building there as well. I mean, this is obviously something that we think about quite a bit at MSP, right? Because we do virtual events, but also we do offline events as well, such that people can like facilitate their offline networks that they can persist online after the fact. Well, changing gears a little bit, I think one thing that is kind of top of mind for a lot of folks right now is notions of sustainable growth, right? Kind of in a much higher interest rate environment where money is sloshing around a little less, aggressively. People need to be more thoughtful about their investments. Their kind of hurdle rates are a little bit higher that folks need to clear. What are some kind of like thoughts that you guys have at Insight around kind of like the key steps to sustainable growth that organizations should be thinking about?
Yeah, no, good question. And so there's this, I guess not misconception. I guess there's been sort of like three ways to grow, right? Like grow at all costs, grow profitably only, right? Focus on EBITDA, and then sort of there's the middle ground, grow in a sustainable way, right? Like you can still grow and at a high rate, but try and do it in a more effective way. I think we like to say sustainable and effective versus efficient, because you can be very efficient at losing, right? You can do it very gracefully and efficiently. If you go 0-16, that was pretty efficient in a football season. So what you don't want that, right? You want to be effective and sustainable. And I think it's important. I think a lot of companies, or I guess maybe it's human nature, right? We tend to try and change when there's crisis, right? Like think about maybe you don't work out as much, and until the doctor says like, hey, you've got an issue, you're like, okay, now I got to change, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of discipline to say, no, I want to be consistent and work out and eat healthy, period, right? And same thing with companies. It takes an impending recession or something economic to say, oh my God, I should have been doing things differently. And so what we try and espouse is, from a sustainability perspective, you should always be trying to grow as effective and sustainable as possible. Don't wait for a recession to hit. And I think those are the companies that are the most successful, that have probably the strongest leaders, and that really are thinking long term. Doesn't mean you still can't take risks, right? You can still take risks in that environment, but you're doing things in a much more thoughtful way and investing dollars in resources and product, et cetera, rightfully so, versus just sprinkling money everywhere like if you were in Vegas. So
yeah, I think, I mean, it would be ideal if folks could, if leaders and founders could be insulated from the realities of like what other people are doing in the market per se, and say like, hey, you know what, I'm going to do efficient growth. But you're also like subject to the market as well, right? Like there's only, there's scarce advertising inventory. There's scarce, like, I don't know, buyer attention. And if you have other folks who are, I don't know, to use an example, like if somebody else's SDRs are going outbound and offering everybody like AirPods Pro or whatever, like something ridiculous, right? Like, hey, here's this $300 thing for like, just take a demo, man.
yep.
Then like, it can be hard to kind of like toe the line, right? In a situation like that, because that's like, potentially your buyer who's like, well, I guess I'm like not going to take your demo because that one has like
I got
AirPods
something.
associated
Yeah.
with. Yeah. So, I mean, I wonder if there's a mechanism, and like there's that. And then there's the other thing too, is like in these, in your board conversations as like a founder, you're literally like, as soon as you raise a given round, you're thinking about what the next round is going to be, right? And like hitting the milestones in order to kind of get there. And so if there are certain market expectations, like, hey, look, like if you don't triple between your A and your B, like, just go pound sand, right? Get out of here. And so that has like, and so now if that's like the perception of like those investors, and now you have to work backwards, there's going to be investment behavior from a hiring standpoint and marketing standpoint that is like pretty balls out. And so I guess like, what would be the mechanism by which, I don't know, what would be the recommendation by which to kind of like thread that needle, where you have a bunch, you're subject to the market, and you have your kind of internal investors being like, hey, like if you don't triple, or if you don't, like in the ensuing 18 months, like we're not going to be able to raise an incremental round, so too bad. How do you resist that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I would say, at least from the operating side, right? When we're giving guidance to our portfolio companies, I'll go back to driving sustainability. So if you can't triple, but you've got NRR of 147%, right? You've got GRR of 95%, right? So gross retention and net retention. And 80% of your reps are achieving quota. Like those are all metrics that any investor is going to love, right? So
Sure.
I would not
Look
focus
for other
on
signifiers.
exactly that show like, hey, this is a healthy business that has long-term value versus just throwing a bunch of dollars at things to maybe stack the numbers, right? And so to your point on like, where are my choices? We try to think of things in terms of waterfalls, right? So when you're thinking about, all right, I end the year at 10 million in ARR and I've got to get to 30. We ask leaders to, all right, let's waterfall how you get from 10 to 30, right? Is it, all right, X amount's going to come from new product, right? Y amount's going to come from rep productivity. Z amount's going to come from I go into a new market, et cetera. Okay, now let's really try and test those. To your point, maybe I'm expecting my productivity increase from my demos increasing and my close rate. And so I've got to invest in AirPod Pros because everybody else is doing it. Fine. But that's right. Okay. Then I'm betting on that because I'm assuming my conversion rate's going to go higher. Then I can't go invest somewhere else. Right. And part of what we also try and lead people to water is you can't do everything. Right. You really have to figure out, especially in today's time, because there's limited capital, where am I going to play and where am I not going to play? Right. Because if I try and spread myself too thin, you're not going to be successful. So the process of going through the waterfall lets you test which one of these actually is going to have a higher likelihood to help me get to my end state. And can I support it? How much risk is there? Am I building enough pipeline? Am I not? Because if you spread yourself too thin, again, I got too many bars. You're not going to be as successful.
I wonder what the recommendations. So I think you guys did some surveying recently, and Jeremy presented some of the really interesting outcomes from that in at the virtual summit, the Mega SCO. Probably everyone who's here today, maybe didn't have the opportunity to watch that. So maybe we can drop the link for that presentation because it was pretty sweet. But I think it was focused on what are the kind of like the biggest sources of like untapped advantage that a lot of organizations, because I think the methodology was, you guys looked at, you had everyone self-assess, right? Like, how are you doing as compared to your competitors? And then ask them if they were doing, like, how well they were doing or not doing, a big inventory of like actions. And then looked at the things that the high performing companies were doing that no one else was doing. So like, as an example, like, compensation automation, like everyone's doing that, right? Like, okay, great. Right. Yeah. Like there's not a lot of alpha, like there's not a lot of like marginal advantage in that, versus there were some other things that were kind of like not obvious that some of the higher performing organizations were doing that the rest of folks weren't doing. Do you have a recollection of some of the kind of like those?
Yeah, I'll tee up some of those. And it's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because it is, what we're trying to figure out is the companies that are sort of doing better or doing innovative things, like why are they doing it? To your point, like everyone does, whether you're using QuotaPath or something else, somebody's using something, right? Yeah. Ostensibly, or using Excel, right? Yeah. Versus one of the things that we see is the companies that are looking at leading indicators versus lagging indicators is one of them. Really understand their business better, right? Because everybody goes to the board and says, well, hey, the metrics I talked about before, here's my CAC payback, it went up or down, right? Or my NRR, GRR, which is great. Like that's all awesome stuff.
Here's my SaaS metrics.
Yeah, right. Which if you're not doing it, you should be doing it. But the leading indicators and really understand, like, am I building pipeline, right? And how is that changing week over week? Am I are my close rates going up? Are my win rates going up or down, right? Are my ASPs, right, average deal size, going up or down? That gives me a sense of where are we going and what's causing those things to change. Is it the economy? Is it the customer? Is it product? Is it sales efficiency, marketing efficiency, et cetera? So taking that proactive look at some of those metrics is one of the things we saw people sort of understanding a little bit better than some of their peers, which is great, right? So I'd highly suggest figuring out what are those core metrics, not only from a sales perspective, but from a marketing perspective, product also, right? Like product adoption metrics, usage metrics. Are you tracking that and the trending? And can it guide you to make decisions before there's a crisis, right? So almost like crisis aversion.
Yeah, totally. It's like, yeah, the further you can get ahead, the better off you are. The like measuring leading indicators. I mean, obviously, like the best kind of encapsulation of this for sales was Cracking the Sales Management Code by Jason Jordan and Michelle Vazana, right? Which talks about, I forget what their specific nomenclature is, but it's kind of like leading indicators, intermediaries, and kind of like lags, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't just like doing this is you can't just do this. You can't
do
just
all
do
of them.
this. Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
like an assembly line, right? Like you don't just look at like the material coming in the front of the assembly line and like how many finished goods are coming out the back. Like you actually have to have probes in the assembly
Everything,
line
yeah.
as you go, because that way you'll be able to figure out like where the hitch in this assembly line versus that assembly line is going to be. But I think that like, it's funny. There's like we see this quite a bit with our customers where the thing that used to be table stakes is like SaaS metrics, right? And then the thing in the last few years that is that organizations have gotten much better at, of course, is just like forecasting. And the funny thing about forecasting is that if you think about it, like it feels like a leading indicator, but it's actually kind of a lagging indicator. And they're like, because people are saying like, and it's just like one of those things where like, humans really struggle with like kind of perceiving time and math. And so in the case of the forecast, like you're saying, hey, this is what's going to land next quarter, right? But the thing is, like, the things that are going to land next quarter were probably instantiated like last quarter, or maybe even the quarter before that, right? So like you actually would have had line of sight on what would eventually become the forecast, 3 months ago or 6 months ago or what have you, from looking at things like, first meeting volume or new opportunity inflow, or like the number of ops or maybe pipe that is hitting certain kind of key stages. And so the notion of just like having a more refined like forecasting workflow, that it's like not Google Sheets, whatever. And there's a bunch of like good, good products that exist for that. Obviously, like Clary's really popular with larger organizations, and there's like a bunch of others. And of course, like SalesLoft and Outreach and Gong now all have like their forecasting solutions as well. But I think what people are starting to realize is that like that's kind of table stakes, and now trying to get even more leading indicatory is more powerful. The analog that we use at Atrium, of course, is like Moneyball, right? And just making sure that that's, that you're creating a data-driven culture throughout your organization, to ensure that like from leadership, like that can't live in like the data team. Like, oh yeah, like that's where, that's where analysis happens, is like over there. It actually has to be like devolved to the edges of the network, because that's like where people are kind of like taking action.
I like that you said that, because like you're right, forecasting is very lagging, right? I think effective pipeline management is sort of the leading work, right, in terms of whether you're using a tool or not. And we work with a company called Discern that a lot of our portfolio companies use, which is like a lighter version of Clary, right? That is more for early stage companies. That gives you phenomenal metrics, some of the ones I talked about, in a very easy way. But back to like some of the best companies, what they're doing, or leaders, right? Not just within our portfolio, but that we see in the market, is they really understand like, what does it take for a rep to be successful? And so I can measure reps and know, all right, I know a rep has to do X number of meetings and calls, but also has to build X amount of pipe each week or month or quarter, depending if you've got enterprise, mid-market, or transactional sales, right? If you're tracking those things, then it's a lot easier to stay week over week, month over month, are people where they're supposed to be, right? So now I'm going micro level versus macro, and I can pinpoint as a manager, do I need to talk to Johnny or Sally or whoever, versus just having 50,000 foot discussions. We've found that to be very, very successful, is having those metrics at the rep level.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something, that's why we like, the rep level is something that's like really critical, and this is why we kind of like Moneyball is like a good metaphor for this, like, and I think people are really getting it now, because like you've got like Peloton out there, and you've got Strava, and you've got you've got Whoop, and you've got these things that kind of like bring quantified self in like to the forefront for folks. I just dropped a link in the chat to this presentation that I've done on Moneyball for sales. But I think like one of the things that we talk about here at Atrium is that like averages lie, or like totals and averages lie. Because what they do is they abstract away like so like the fundamental unit of of contribution in a sales organization is like the seller, right? So like where your bookings number comes from all the reps you have and all their bookings, right? And as a result, looking at breaking it down on a per rep basis and saying, oh, and then looking at the leading indicators on a per rep basis. This person's tracking poorly with respect to bookings or what have you. And the reason why is because his win rate is problematic. Oh, and by the way, the reason why his win rate is problematic is because his conversion rate out of proposal is problematic as compared to his peers. Got it. Now we have something that actually we can impact and change. Like, okay, we've got closing problems here. Let's go ahead and investigate what that is right there. Whereas like Susie over here, she's tracking poorly with respect to her forecast, right, and bookings as well. Oh, what's the problem there? Oh, her win rate's fine. Her ASP is fine. Okay, cool. Oh, she just doesn't have enough activity. Okay, that's easy to fix, right?
Yeah, we always say
different people will have different problems,
absolutely.
right?
Like one thing to take away is we always say ask the 5 whys, right? Because if you ask why 5 times, you will get to, by the time you ask the 5th why, you should have an answer as to exactly what the root cause is. And to your point, it's different by rep sometimes, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, you talk to one rep and it's like, oh, the issue is this. And it's like, no, for that person it was, but you might have 5 different issues, or it might be a product issue or something else. So yeah, we always recommend going deep to figure out exactly what's going on. So you also want to be careful with like survivorship bias, right? You don't want to do the analysis and say, oh, we think the issue is this, let's fix it, but that wasn't, you're fixing for the wrong thing, right? So that's also very critical to think through.
Yeah, I think one of the I have a master class that I do on data-driven coaching that kind of uses the kind of like the OODA loop kind of metaphor, right? Like the observe, orient, decide, act, and then you have to loop back again. Like you may or may not. So first you form a hypothesis as to what the problem might be, and the mechanism by which we do that, of course, is by asking those 5 whys and saying okay, cool, this rep's bookings are off right here. Why is that? It's one of the things that we Atrium automates this process, but then also we have these really handy managerial metrics laminates here. Maybe we can drop a link in the chat for folks if they want to sign up for that. We send them out free, hundreds a month. They're all over sales manager and sales leaders' desks nationwide. But you debug exactly where that root cause might be, tackle it. Okay, now we have to loop back. Did it fix it or did it not? If it didn't, that's okay. Don't hide. Just say okay, cool. Obviously that was not the right hypothesis. Let's move on to the next thing there. One thing actually I want to I think another big transition that we're seeing in organizations is devolving that insight down to the managerial level as much as possible. Like Hillary, I did a presentation for the Insight portfolio with Jeremy and Hillary. I think it was in December or something around data-driven coaching, and but specifically at the manager level, that's because I mean, as a sales operations person, I think you can probably empathize with this, or anybody else who's a sales operations, revenue operations on the phone right now can empathize with this. You can kind of see it, but you're not the one who's can fix, even if you try to fix it or try to coach the rep, it's get out of here, nerd, right? And so making sure that the manager who's actually responsible for that rep, and the rep knows that they are accountable to them, is the person who can push in the relevant direction, can be a really powerful thing. I wonder what you've seen in terms of managers being enabled in order to be more thoughtful and data driven versus that being the realm of RevOps or the realm of the data team.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And honestly, we say this a lot. The most important role in any company, not only in the topic we're discussing today, is the first line manager.
Yeah.
Right. Because regardless what the CEO says or the head of whatever, if the first line manager isn't reinforcing the culture, the values, the quota, the marketing strategy, product, etc. That's what I listen to, right? Because I, as an individual contributor, I don't have access to the CEO or the chief product officer or whatever. Like, I'm talking to my boss, Sally, right? And she's the one coaching me, doing one-on-ones. And so we actually spend a lot of time. We partner a lot with Winning by Design for our portfolio companies to provide manager training to our portfolio companies, just because that role, if it is not enabled, if it is not trained effectively, right? You train the CRO or the head of sales and the head of marketing on pipeline management, forecasting, lead management. If that doesn't translate down one level down or two levels down, useless, right? And so you have to make sure, especially if you're in RevOps, that you got access to or a strategy to make sure that all managers are effectively trained. They're on board, that we're reinforcing best practices, and also that you're spending time in the field, right? You got to understand, like, what are the reps feeling? How are they thinking? There's nothing worse than being, whether you're a sales leader or a RevOps leader, if you are not out in the field with the people on the ground, you are not doing your job, right? Because those are the people talking to customers. Those are the people using your tech stack, not using your tech stack, using your process, not using your process. So you cannot manage that from far away. And again, it doesn't mean like you're talking to them live. You can do a Zoom call, right?
Yeah,
Just
but
saying,
also it can be like sampling too. So
yeah,
I just did a master class the other day on what I'm calling servant leadership revenue operations. It sounds very fancy, right? But the whole idea is it's like, one of the metaphors I like to use for revenue operations is like the product manager of the sales organization. And so what you should be doing is you should be thinking about, like, it shouldn't be reactive, where like folks are coming to you and it's like whack-a-mole, or it's like, here, do this thing. You're like, great, I got it for you, right? Versus like, it's all features and bugs. Like, hey, I'm seeing this issue right here. Okay, I'm not necessarily going to jump on that immediately. I'm going to, log it. I'm going to prioritize it. And then moreover, I'm going to be intentional about what you probably need. And like, what you probably need is going to be a variety of different things, right? It's going to be like, collateral access and like talk tracks and things like that. And that would be like, coming from product marketing and enablement or what have you. But operations might be involved in like making that really easy for you to get access to and like proactive. And then similarly, it might be, insight and insight and data around like what your reps are, like how your reps are performing on a rep by rep basis, and like how to debug that. And so rather than relying on managers to kind of like raise their hand and like ask for something that they saw on some webinar or whatever, it's like, hey, like, here's actually your holistic harness for your team here. And ideally it's not like a massive like 8x8 dashboard,
no,
like
totally.
wall of charts, but it's like, yeah, here's the like 6 for you to pay attention to. And like the most successful organizations historically have, oftentimes they'll have kind of like junior analysts who are like bird dogging that for folks. Obviously it's pretty expensive to do that with humans. It's funny, we were talking about the kind of like assembly line metaphors, and I'm a big one of my like when I talk about Atrium, I say that Atrium is actually like, it's a software company that's kind of the mixture of 2 books. One is The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh, which is all about like leading indicators in athletic execution, right? Because it's very difficult for an individual player to like impact the big score, but like what you can do is like do the thing in front of you with high excellence, like high quantity of high quality execution. Same is true with sales. And then the other one is The Goal, which is a manufacturing manufacturing kind of like operations research book written as a novel. Why not? Because it's like makes it more readable. But I know that like the book that you just put out takes a lot of that kind of like Toyota lean manufacturing kind of concepts and applies it to efficient growth of organizations. Maybe you can kind of share with folks a little bit about what is it called again? What a unicorn knows?
What a unicorn knows. Yeah. Before I go there, I wanted to touch on something you said on the RevOps role. I'd say,
please,
for those of you that are in RevOps, sales ops, marketing ops, et cetera, product ops, the differentiation between a good leader, right, or maybe you're not a leader, maybe just in the organization, and a phenomenal leader is, and I like how you brought up the servant leadership, is like, you need to become a trusted advisor, right? No one values as much the person that is just in the background. You don't want to be the intake form. right? Like I have an issue in Salesforce, or
I need a validation role. I need a validation role.
I need to roll
I need
out
a validation
quotas to
role.
do this, right? Like, yeah, you want to be strategic, helping set the strategy with the organization on like, well, hey, why are we going into Germany versus France? I did the analysis. You know, the TAM is higher. It's going to cost more to go into Germany. Here's why. Blah 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 blah. Right. So focus on solving problems and being the leading indicator, tying back to what we talked about versus the lagging indicator. There's always value in the lagging indicator, but your career will blossom further if you focus on being proactive and strategic versus reactive and not as strategic. So, which I think is important. So,
Yeah.
and then on your point, yeah, the book that Matt's somebody I've worked with for 10, 11 years and now works with us at Insight, have coming out in, the end of February, What a Unicorn Knows. Really what we try to do is take years of experience working with public companies, startups, and now Insight portfolio companies, and take the concept of lean, which is predominantly attributed to manufacturing or product development, right? So lean startup came out a while ago, and it's more about product. We've tried to take those concepts and really apply them. You can apply them to anything, right? Our focus has been more go-to-market, product development, marketing, and sales. And actually, given the economic environment, could not have come out at a better time in terms of, since I have potentially less resources, right, less dollars, I need to be much more efficient and effective at running my business. And so I might need to change my strategy to be more focused. I might need to reevaluate, my processes to take out slack in the system, right? And I think those concepts that we provide in the book's actually very practical. It's not academic at all. Gives you real examples, templates that you can use to basically run your business in a much more effective and sustainable way. So very excited for that to come out later this month.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the concepts, thank you for sending me the kind of preview copy. As I was kind of flipping through things, this is something I was coaching our SDR team on the other day. Like there's lots of manufacturing concepts, right? Like don't overproduce something, right? Like inventory is your enemy. What does that mean? Well, like, having more opportunities than than an AE can effectively work is like not useful. Oh, okay. Well, like what would be the indicators of that sort of thing? And this is something that we see with our customers a lot of the time, is like, because Atrium has what we call like a sales assist motion, where organizations will turn on a free Atrium account. It's like a read-only connection to their Salesforce instance. It takes like 3 minutes to turn on, and like all of a sudden they have a world-class metrics harness. Invariably, one of the things that immediately shows up is like bad pipeline hygiene, and you'll see, maybe not across an entire organization, but you'll see some reps who have like really bad, like untouched opportunity counts, stuck ops, etc. And that's essentially like inventory that like marketing. Yeah, like marketing paid for that, and it's just like sitting there, right? And it's not being worked. And that's why it's like very much like a factory model, right? So like the example I love to use is I Love Lucy. You got like Lucy and Ethel on the chocolate line, right? And like if there's too many chocolates coming down the chocolate line, and they're like, they can't wrap them fast enough, and they're like falling on the ground, and they're like, losing them, and so on and so forth. That can be a problem, and that's why that's why kind of instrumenting all along the process ends up being really important, right? So like down to the individual rep level. So as an example, untouched opportunities would be a signifier that a rep is overloaded. Either if they have high activity and they still have untouched opportunities, probably overloaded, right? Like
it's good. Like lean honestly applies to the lead to cash process is a perfect example, right? Because you have a lead come in, certain things happen, it turns into an opportunity, certain things happen, it ultimately gets closed. That then turns into the post-sales process, right? We implement the solution, whatever it might be, go live, and then the customer pays us somewhere in between that, right? Then the process repeats itself. And so if you map out your process, I can guarantee you there is massive amounts of waste, right? Especially as you are a larger company, you've inherited processes from other people that were well-intentioned, or people were doing things and they're like, why are you doing this? I don't know. Like I got trained on it when I started, and that's what I thought the process was, right?
We've always done it. We've always done it that way. So you just stopped at the second why there.
Exactly. So what's interesting is when we in all the times I've engaged in the 11 years doing some of this, like the lean process work, we've effectively cut out 20% plus always in the system. Gainsight, who's one of our portfolio companies now, Vista. Nick has a blog online, so this isn't like confidential information. Nick wrote a blog. When we worked with them and did this, they took out 66% out of their post-sales process to reduce time to value, right? So when you do this work, like, it's amazing how much you can take out to be a lot more efficient and effective. So yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's another Atrium customer right there. Love the Gainsight guys. Absolutely amazing corporate culture there. Couldn't be like the nicest human beings in the world.
Strong leadership.
Makes sense.
Yep.
If you're I guess if you're in the customer success business, you got, and like,
you've got to be
CSM's like, biased towards like really nice, like, you got to have a organizational alignment with the vibes in the customer base that you serve. Cool, man. Well, I know that we're running up on time here, but are there any kind of like key insights or kind of like key takeaways that you would be that you would share with people who are here with us today before we break?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, most of you have probably started the fiscal year, right? I don't think anybody's ending a fiscal year. Well, I don't know, maybe you got the April or July, but I think majority are on the Salesforce calendar or normal calendar. But as you think about how you're launching the year and successfully iterate, we've had a lot of companies ask like, hey, should I move to a 6-month plan? Because there's so much uncertainty. So one of the things we're just sharing is like, make sure you are willing to iterate. If things aren't working, make changes. So that's, rule number 1. 2, make sure you're talking to the field, right? The people on the ground that are doing the selling, that are doing the work, know what's going on. They're hearing things. So just make sure you stay close to the ground, especially now, since there's a lot of uncertainty of what's going on. And then for those of you that are in RevOps or, whether you're the lead or growing, again, back to my point, continue to be strategic, be that trusted advisor, add value, and all things will work out. So hook 'em horns.
Gigam Aggies? Isn't that the appropriate rejoinder?
Absolutely not. No,
Absolutely not. Nice, man. Well, Pablo, thank you very much for taking the time to hang out with us. It was super insightful. Please do say hi to Jeremy and Hillary and Richard and Michelle and all the other Insight on-site revenue squad over there. While they're not cutting waste from organizations, muscularly. Cool. Elliot, anything else for us to cover?
No, that's it. I'm gonna wrap things up now. Do want to thank everyone for attending. It was a wonderful session. Big shout out to Atrium for sponsoring this event. Make sure to check them out. Dropped all the links to all the wonderful goodies in the chat, so do make sure to check those out. Big thank you to Pete and Pablo for providing this content. Recordings and key takeaways are going to be available on the MSP page shortly. Don't forget to check out our upcoming events, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Here. Bye.